All right, I've got Adam Carriker from the Carriker Chronicles on. We spoke a little bit about expectations and Nebraska season the last time we chatted, but I want to actually look at the schedule for just a couple of minutes today.
This video is brought to you by BetUS Sportsbook and Casino.
Adam, I appreciate you joining me, man. Like we mentioned this in the last video, but the schedule makers were somewhat kind to Matt Rhule and Nebraska, and the scheduling gods thought it had been long enough since they've really kind of made some noise and bowl games and winning seasons and everything else. But you got to like the start of this schedule. UTEP, Colorado, Northern Iowa, Illinois, all at home. That first third of the schedule seems pretty favorable. Obviously, Colorado is a question mark. But I even feel like that game, Nebraska will be licking their chops to make up for the way that last year's game went in Boulder.
Yeah, you look at these first 7 games, very manageable. UTEP, Colorado, Northern Iowa, Illinois, as you mentioned, all at home. And you mentioned that, and that's huge if we are going to be starting a potentially true freshman quarterback to get those games at home. Your first road game is at Purdue, game 5. Then you get Rutgers. Some people are sleeping on Rutgers. They got a high percentage of their starters returning from last year. Okay, Greg Schiano, apparently he's the only person on planet Earth that can win at Rutgers, but he's back. He's doing it again. And so Rutgers is going to be a difficult game. They come into Lincoln, then you got at Indiana, okay, before they take on those last 5 games with a little bit tougher slate: Ohio State, UCLA, at USC, Wisconsin, and Iowa. But if Nebraska can get out to a fast start, those first 7 games, especially against Colorado, I could see them starting off like 4-5-0 before that Rutgers game.
Yeah, that feels like the linchpin, right? Like if you drop to Colorado, I don't really worry about it like having a carryover effect, but you're just taking, if you beat Colorado, that's one of the more talented teams, especially offensively, that you'll see, especially in that early part. Then you kind of have to go play the games, but you start to pencil things. Okay, well, we're going to beat Northern Iowa. Okay, well, we should beat Illinois at home. All right, the Rutgers game may be a trap, but honestly, if you could get through, it feels like if you can get through worst case 5-2, but more than likely 6-1, you can find a way to get that, steal a win or 2 on the back half. Every game means a lot. A coach is never going to overlook another opponent, but because of the way the last year's game felt like it just was given away to Colorado early, who wasn't a great team. They certainly started hot, but does that one mean a little more this year?
Oh, absolutely. It doesn't help the last 3 times Nebraska's played Colorado, they've lost. And all 3 games, there were points in the game when you felt like Nebraska would win. There was like about a 4th and 20, and it was actually turned out to be Scott Frost's first game. Colorado at home, Nebraska stops them, but then there's a personal foul penalty, gives Colorado the first down, and Colorado goes on to win. Then the next year you go into Colorado, pretty much dominate the first half, have the lead, and then fall apart in the second half, in particular the fourth quarter, and Colorado wins that game. Then last year, the final score wasn't as close as Nebraska fans would have liked, but it was 0-0 with 7 minutes to go before halftime. Yeah. And then Nebraska had 3 turnovers, which gave Colorado the ball 3 times in Nebraska territory. And the Black Shirts, Nebraska's defense, still held Colorado to 2 field goals and a touchdown. It was only 13-0 at halftime, and then they accelerated away the second half. The Buffaloes did. So I think Nebraska fans are sick and tired of losing to Colorado, sick and tired of losing to a team that every time you're like, man, could have won, should have won, didn't get it done. It's in Lincoln. It's a night game. People are going to come hydrated, if you will. And so for me, it's going to be it's going to be a crazy atmosphere. And I think if they win that game, they could easily start the season 4-0. You look at the next game, Northern Iowa, Illinois at home. You look at Purdue, they're projected to finish worst in the Big Ten right now, but that's going to be, if Dylan Raiola is the starter, and that's projected, his first road game of his college career. So Who knows what that could potentially look like. But I look at those first 7 games. 7-0 is possible. I'm not going to sit here and predict that. 5-2, they're not at least 5-2, they got issues. So I kind of sit here thinking 6-1 going into that Ohio State game, October 26th, game 8.
Yeah, if you can get to 6-1, if you could split with Rutgers in Colorado, right? Like nobody wants to give up a loss to either of them right now, and I guess they'd probably want to beat Colorado a little more, but it feels a lot more optimistic there. And like you said, 4-3, like 5-2 has to be the floor. 4-3 makes it really daunting when you look at the back half of the schedule. At Ohio State, obviously really tough. Actually, at Ohio State, at USC, at Iowa, 3 really tough road games down the stretch. What's the most likely upset out of those 3?
Michael Vick at BetUS.com. Catch an incredible 125% sign-up bonus on your first 3 deposits, plus 10% gambler's insurance. BetUS, my online sportsbook and casino.
Out of those 3, I would say Iowa, because every year the game is close. Every year the game is within like a touchdown or a field goal. There's been a lot of times where it's gone into overtime or it's a last-second field goal and Iowa finds a way to win. Right now, they just find a way to win, whereas Nebraska has unfortunately done the opposite, just found ways to lose over the years, and that's what everyone's trying to obviously turn around in Lincoln. You look at the last 5 games, Ohio State definitely going to be a big underdog. UCLA, brand new head coach, Deshaun Foster. It's going to be at home.
Yep.
He's going to be finding his footing. He's never technically been an offensive coordinator, never been a coordinator, never called plays in a game. So it's going to be a big learning curve for him. They do have talent out in Palo Alto, though. So UCLA does have some talent going to USC. Hey, they can score 8 million points. The question is, are they going to give up 8 million and one on the season? Are they going to tackle anybody? But Nebraska is probably going to be a nice little underdog there. Wisconsin and Iowa, for me, those are the 2. It's always close. Every year it's close. Can Nebraska find a way to at least win one of those 2 games and find a way to start winning close games?
Yeah. I also wonder too, and we'll talk realignment here in just a second, but I also wonder too, like just the thing people are talking about this. I don't say, oh, nobody's talking about it but us. But I do think the physicality is something that's not talked about enough with the Pac-12 teams. A ton of talent, right? This is Southern California, especially USC, especially under Lincoln Riley. We know what their offense is going to likely do. But that physicality, especially this late in the year, right? Like you're not playing USC week 1, where USC plays LSU week 1, right? And I think LSU's way more physical, but it's week 1, right? Nobody's banged up, nobody's hurt. You're out there kind of fresh, and I think USC will do fine. Like that'll be a track meet. But man, when they play game 10 on the schedule, it is at home, but they play game 10 of a Big Ten schedule, and they have to go against. I mean, we talked about the offensive line for Nebraska in the last video. How do they fare, right? And UCLA having to make that trip over here to the Midwest, coming from Southern California, are they potentially out physicaled? Can you steal one of those because of that? And then, like you said, if you steal one of those, if you steal one of Wisconsin, Iowa, that's how you maybe get to that 8-4 that we talked about in an earlier video. If you could steal multiple of those, or you do start 7-0, maybe that's how you get to your 9 win. So yeah, I do wonder about the physicality of UCLA, USC specifically. I think Oregon will actually handle that pretty well. Washington, brand new kind of system program that they'll have running there. So I'm not as sure there, but I do wonder about it from the California schools for sure.
I remember growing up, back in yesteryear when the Pac-12 existed, watching the Rose Bowl, and it used to be the Pac-10 versus the Big Ten champ, the Rose Bowl every year. And so many years, the Pac-10 or eventually the Pac-12 would win that game way more often than not. And then I noticed that the SEC teams tend to have really good bowl records. So there's just always been this coincidence of the warm weather teams doing really good year after year, way more often than not in warm weather bowl games. And so I've always been like, what would happen if you had to come to Lincoln or you had to come to Madison in November? And what if it wasn't just a one-off? Because they've got athletes, okay? The Southern teams, the Western teams. So I actually grew up in the state of Washington. So I grew up watching the Pac-10, okay, and the Pac-12 back in the day. And so they've got athletes. But like you mentioned, when you have to show up a week in and week out and get hit in the face and get punched in the mouth and you're supposed to return the jab or the punch or not, like how does that work? Oregon, they're going to step in the Big Ten. They're going to do fine, okay? I think UCLA's got a learning curve. I think USC is one of the most intriguing teams in the country to watch. How are they going to do? They could do really well or they could do really bad. I don't think they're going to do really bad. I'm actually very intrigued by them. I think Washington's going to have a rough year. They lost 20 of 22 starters, lost their head coach, lost their AD, lost a lot of stuff. And so they lost more starters than any other Power 4 team in the country. So I think they're going to have a bit of a rougher year just because of that. But I do think they'll eventually be good again. But I've always wondered what these, especially like, back when Nebraska was playing Miami or Florida State in the Orange Bowl every year. Well, what if you had to come up here and do that week after week in the cold weather? How would that go? And we're going to get a glimpse of that.
Yeah. And not only, you mentioned the one-off, also the month-long break, USC's gonna have to play. Like I said, they're gonna play all the a lot of the West Coast teams anyway, but they got to play a lot of Big Ten teams leading up to that, right? Not just everybody in a bowl game after a month-long layoff. So it'll be interesting to see how it fares. I think you mentioned this in another video, but final record prediction for Nebraska. I think I agree with you on kind of where they get to, but if you're calling it today, if you're calling your shot, where are they getting?
So I have them beating UTEP, beating Colorado, Northern Illinois, Purdue, Rutgers, Indiana. Now, they're going to lose probably at least one of those games in there. It's going to be a true freshman moment. It's going to be, hey, these are 18 to, well, now they're like 27, but 18 to 22-year-olds. Something's going to not bounce your way. So the worst I think that they should be is potentially 5-2. I'm going to go 6-1. Now, when you look at those last 5 games, probably going to pick Ohio State to win that game. So that puts them at 6-2. I do have them beating UCLA in Lincoln November 2nd. Okay, so that puts them at 7-2 on the road at USC. USC does have athletes. It's going to be at home for them right now. This can change over time. I got USC winning 7-3. And then those last 2 games, Wisconsin and Iowa, always close, always physical. I got Nebraska winning one, losing one. I don't know exactly which one, but I have a final record prediction of 8-4 for the Huskers.
Yeah, I think I'll join you with that. I think 8-4 sounds good. If you get off to a hotter start, if you can out physical some of those West Coast teams, maybe you could sneak up to that 9-win mark. So, Adam, where can people follow you? Where can they find more of your work?
Yeah, you can check me out on X. All right, check me out on Facebook, Instagram, also YouTube, the Tube of You, as I like to call it. And we have a website as well. CarrikerChronicles.com is my show. So the CarrikerChronicles.com or Carriker Chronicles on YouTube. Also the Big Ten Show and the Believe Podcast Network as well.
Awesome. Thanks, buddy.